right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Hammer and Chisel Performance Podcast. I'm your host, John Heck. Now, before we get rolling here, I just want to touch on a couple things. Number one, as always, want to give a shout out to the sponsors of the podcast, Troponin Supplements. As always, keep me decked out in the Power T bodybuilding jersey. And you guys hear me talk about them all the time. In my opinion and my personal experience, they have the best products in the market. I recommend them to all my athletes, all my clients. I've been using them myself for years before I ever became affiliated with them. Justin Harris is a close friend, a good mentor, and he put together just some incredible products. So I highly recommend them to you guys. Check out the Troponin Supplements website. Use code HECK for a discount. And then the second order of business, I feel like I just have to address this elephant in the room. Guys, if you're watching this visually, you are seeing my clean-shaven baby face for the first time ever. And to be honest, I am seeing my clean-shaven baby face for the first time in 13 years as of last night. Now, the beard is already on its way back. Let's be honest here, I was peer pressured into doing this by my wife last night. I was trimming my beard, trimming it down really short. And, you know, I'm in diet mode. The jawline's getting a little carved out. I'm getting lean. And my wife's like, why don't you just shave it all off? And she pressured me. I went for it. Here we are. But anyway, just wanted to address that. Now, getting to business. The guest that I have on, I've got a treat for you guys. So I'm fired up about this one. So today's guest, he has been a long time bodybuilding coach and a damn good one. In my opinion, one of the absolute best out there. He's a bodybuilding judge. He himself was a competitive bodybuilder. He was a competitive powerlifter and a damn strong one. And he's been in the game for a long time. And I put out a post, you know, kind of teasing this episode a couple weeks back. And I kind of referred to him as a hidden gem in the bodybuilding world. And we'll get to that. But on a personal note, he was my first ever mentor when it came to dieting and the bodybuilding lifestyle. And that has gone a long way for the trajectory of my life, my career, and everything. So without further ado, Cornelius Parkin, welcome to the podcast, man.
Oh, John, thank you so much for those kind words. That's the best intro I've ever had. So I appreciate that very much, man.
Well, it's an intro you deserve, man. And I mean, it's true. So you were the first ever coach that I really worked with for dieting. And I mean, I can remember the exact diet itself. I've still got it written down somewhere at home. And I mean, working with you, that was the first time in my life I ever got really lean. And it just kind of was the first domino that tipped over and then set off a chain of events. And I got really lean with you. I learned so much. I fell in love with the process. And then, you know, I kind of went into a growth phase. And because I'd gotten so lean, I grew a ton of muscle.
Oh.
And then you and I kind of worked together on and off over the years. And then you worked with me for what I would consider to be one of my best ever growing phases, kind of a rebound phase that I did, you know, a few years into things. But anyway, man, I mean, I've learned a ton from you. And I called you a hidden gem just because, you know, you look around the bodybuilding world as far as coaches go, the Matt Jansons, the Chad Nichols, the Hani Rambads, kind of these big mainstream names. And those are the guys who get all the attention, right? But let's be honest, why do those guys get all the attention? It's because they happen to have some clients who have gone on to win Olympia titles. And were they responsible for creating those monsters? No, not really. I mean, when you have the genetic cream of the crop coming to you already at a very advanced stage, it's very easy to build a name off those individuals. Now, I'm not going to, you know, badmouth any of these coaches. I'm not saying anything negative about them, but you know, the point is when you've got stallions of clients, it's very easy to have your name blow up. But in my opinion, I've worked with some of those coaches I just mentioned. I've talked to competitors they've worked with. I know their reputations. I think you're probably better than all of those guys.
Well, John, thank you. So that's a really nice compliment. And what I'm going to say is there's always this argument about if you have a Phil Heath, that you have this genetic stallion. Now, what I would say is this is true. However, as a coach, what we're really doing is helping manage the client's mindset. And what I have learned is often some of the people with the very best physiques have like the craziest mindsets. And they're sometimes the hardest to keep level. So I think where these coaches are really strong is due to their reputation. This, the egg, chicken and the egg, which comes first. But as far as their reputation goes, they're known of being so good with top level guys that if you're a top level guy and you hire him, you're probably going to listen. You're probably going to calm down and just follow the plan. As you know, like Chris Aceto is known for having like very short replies, it's very brief what he's doing. But what he's doing is he's constantly managing this client's emotions and his or her psychological state, which I would say goes a very long way. And often when we look at the so-called genetic weaklings, as we call them, let's be honest, John, if we followed these people around year round, looked at what they were eating, looked at how they trained, looked at how they treated themselves, would we really say they have poor genetics or that they're just living a terrible lifestyle? And even if you get the best coach, if you do 6 months, if you've spent 25 years neglecting your body, you can only expect so much.
No, you made a couple really good points there, and I want to get into both of them. So, first of all, I think you make a really good point about coaches having a ton of value with those top guys, more from the psychological component. And like me working in football strength and conditioning, especially kind of top college level in the NFL, I walked away from it thinking, you know what? The impact that we have on these guys probably isn't as much from the training programming itself. These guys are already freaks. Like they don't need us from the programming standpoint. What the impact we really have is more the intangible factors, the instilling the toughness, the grit, the discipline, the accountability, all of those kind of psychological team building component type things. Like that was where we really had the impact. So that resonates with me talking about working with, some of those top guys. And when it comes to some of the top pros, like what do you see with some of the mindsets of some of these guys? You said, sometimes they've got these, they can be a little crazy, a little off the rails. Is it, you think it's a matter of they've heard too many opinions, they have a hard time listening to a coach, they have a hard time following a protocol, they want to push too hard, that what are some examples of some of those issues you got to reel in?
You ask an interesting point, John. So you have to think about it. Any extreme athlete will have diagnosable psychological issues. Like if you really sat them down, and it's not a negative. We all have it. I was a competitive athlete for a long time in different things, so I fully understand it. But if you think about it, you're going to have something a little up with you because extreme bodybuilding is, no one's pretending that's health, right? It's its own activity. And what I have really realized, these guys who get really, really big, when you spend time with them, they're often like, the way I describe them as big teddy bears. As weird as that might sound. And all they talk about and all they want to do is eat their food, go to the gym, and maybe play Xbox. And that's legitimately, and they are happy with that, which is amazing, right? But it's that mindset. And they don't really worry they don't worry more than about their training that's coming up. And then they complain if they don't have a cheat meal. That's what they're focused on. And all they're focusing on is this bodybuilding and this very small tunnel vision approach. And I find like that is a big part of the secret of how these guys get really big. And I'm talking about over 250 pounds in bodybuilding shape. They're really, really big guys. It's really all of them that I have met are like that. And they often like to smoke marijuana. It's just this very relaxed approach. While a lot of people, you're more like myself in this way, John, maybe if it get more fired up about various things in life. You've got different things going on. So it's kind of not impossible, but you wouldn't even want to maybe put all your effort. I know for myself, I have had periods of time where I put all my effort into the bodybuilding. And then after doing that for like 6 months or so at a time, doing a show, doing a rebound, that I had enough of. That I would take some time off. While these other guys, they're happy just to keep going.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And like you look at some of the demeanors of the top guys, like Chris Bumstead, for example. Like if you watch his videos, he's just kind of the most like even keeled, like chill, whatever type of dude. And I think you see that with a lot of those top guys. Whereas if you're the type of guy who's just, you're so neurotic, you're analyzing every variable, you're overthinking, your cortisol's through the roof. Like those are the guys who probably don't quite make it to that, to those levels. And I mean, you see it in other sports too. Like the elite of the elite guys are often, I don't want to say, not the most intelligent, but they're not overthinkers. Like they just go, they just do. It's their life. They don't question it. But I thought you made another good point a couple minutes back, which, I think people use this excuse of like, oh, I've got poor genetics, the genetic weakling. And you said it. Well, these are also probably people who have never truly applied themselves when it comes to diet, training, everything that goes into it. And one thing that I like about bodybuilding is, okay, not everyone has the genetic potential to be standing on the Olympia stage, but everyone has the potential to build a hell of a physique. I mean, you dedicate yourself to 10 years of a bodybuilding lifestyle. I mean, you're going to have a physique you can be damn proud of no matter who you are, right?
Absolutely, dude. Like, I mean, and the point you made about the overthinkers, this is what I have seen the most, because I've had many of these people hire me over the years. These are people who are extremely focused on drug regimes, diet specific, really precise stuff. And maybe the training is even really precise. I had a client like this, and I had worked with him online for a while. And he had told me stuff like, oh, yeah, I can squat 405, 10 by 10. I'm like, that's strong for a dude that's about 200 pounds or so. And the day he comes and trains with me, I kid you not, I took him to failure on bench press with 95 pounds within 20 reps. He couldn't complete 20 reps of barbell squats with 115 pounds. Not done correctly. And I wasn't making him do 10-second negatives or anything like that. It wasn't like trying to prove a point, but just what they think they're doing when they're training and what they're actually doing is often so different. And they put so much effort into writing these numbers. How many reps away from failure am I? It's like these things, that's what they're focusing on. You're focusing on not working too hard. That's the craziest thing to focus on if you think about it.
You just reminded me of something I had a note of that I was going to touch on later, but I think this is a perfect segue to it. I saw you have a quote that bodybuilding is like a martial art. And you applied that statement to sort of movement. You applied it to training. And you've always been someone who puts a lot of value on movement quality and just, mind muscle connection and things like that. Can you expand on that statement a little bit, that bodybuilding should be treated like a martial art when it comes to training?
Absolutely. I mean, it should be treated like a martial art from all the aspects of the monk-like discipline that you need with your diet, with your lifestyle in general. I think true bodybuilding, not this neurotic drug induced, it's just a lot of people just becoming junkies, to be honest. That's what it is. And it is. And then before you know it, now they're taking something to sleep because they can't sleep. Now they're taking this. And before you know, this is just a full-on drug addict. And then it's a matter of a few years until they crash and burn completely. And it's a slippery slope. But as far as the body goes, if you want the best, most aesthetic looking body, it only makes sense that you would move that body with load throughout all of its functions. You wouldn't just go, okay, I'm going to do these specific movements, build the muscles up really big, add 100 pounds to my muscular base, but I'm never going to do any lateral movements for my hips. What do you think that's going to do? I mean, first, people always focus on training performance, so they don't really care until that suffers. But if you look at the physiques, John, you can see a physique that has, and it comes down to the hips. The hips are the engine of the body. If your hips are bound up, the body is basically a bunch of tubes with blood and stuff passing through it, and we are covered by one fascial sheath, right? That's why we can impact the toe. It affects something up here. People never it didn't make sense to people why that would be, but it's because we are covered in one sheath from head to toe. So if that sheath is in any way bound up, or our hips are moving or something, the entire thing is going to be wonky. Everything is, and if you start really objectively looking at most physiques, you will see, this guy has a lot of muscle, but his entire body, it's all twisted. While if you see a true bodybuilding artist like Ty Green, people go, oh, he spends 5 hours training. Well, I realized that we need about 3 hours of generalized training, doing different movements per day, just to keep the body fully functioning. So it's no big surprise that he's taking 5 hours. So these people who are going, we're doing 5 hours of training per week, bodybuilding training. I'm not really doing, maybe a little bit of stretching or so. Your body isn't moving nearly enough. Those reps in the gym is not enough movement for your entire body. So it's going to, over time, basically calcify on itself and bind in more and more When the hips find in, the shoulders will find into the pecs. It's a imploding disaster.
Yeah, and I think Kai Green's a perfect example. I mean, you watch him train, you watch him move. I mean, he embodies that martial artist uh, uh, vibe about him, and he's flexible. I mean, he looks like half what he's doing looks almost like loaded yoga at times.
That's how I really see it now, John. That is, you said earlier to me before we started that I had gone in a different direction with how I was coaching and that. And I said, I have added to it. And what that means, John, is I have really, truly understood the importance of having the body fully open. And because 99.9% of people do not have fully open hips, my Instagram feed is like a repetitive reel about this.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to get it. Because once you realize it, it's still really hard to get them open. That's not easy to do. Psychologically or physically, there's a lot of reasons that we bind up like that. And getting it open, that work isn't easy. So I try and hammer it into people's brains so they at least acknowledge the issue.
Yeah, and I can really personally relate to this because for the vast majority of my career, mobility work has always been important to me. And training like an athlete, training holistically. And I had recently, and I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I went through about a 6-month period of just kind of old school bodybuilding training where I was neglecting that stuff. I was going into the gym. I was barely warming up. I was just getting into the machine. I wasn't doing mobility work. I was not moving laterally. I was not rotating. I wasn't stretching. And I got strong. I was overloading the movements, but then I hit a wall. And then suddenly I just had so many issues pop up. Suddenly, my hips were so tight. It was leading to issues with my knees. It was leading to issues with everything. And then suddenly I couldn't push hard with my lower body training anymore because I had so much knee pain. My hips were so tight. It led to lower back issues. So then my training took a hit. And let me get your opinion on this. Do you think that the flexibility by opening everything up allow not only ignore the injury prevention, things like that, but do you think it helps with hypertrophy? Like some guys believe that the stretching and all that literally helps with hypertrophy. You're giving the muscle room to grow, as kind of the old statement goes.
Put it this way, John. There is a bodybuilder. He is he's like, in my opinion, the world's best natural bodybuilder. His name is Doug Miller. Yeah. He owns the gym that I go to. If you ever watch this man train, you wouldn't doubt what he says. The man legitimately trains for 2 to 3 hours, harder than anybody I see. He uses loads that most of us would be doing 5 to 8, but he does 20 with it. He's obsessive. Like, this is his thing. He is zoned in on this, but he also does about 4 different treatments per week, different therapies. That's why if you ever look at his arms and stuff, the muscles hang in such a crazy way. People are like, wow, the guy's arms is so crazy. Well, I realized once you get the hips open, the shoulders align, literally the triceps will come down nearly an inch more down the arm. So a lot of the really aesthetic parts of these bodies, like Doug Miller that you're seeing, there's plenty of men who are 5'9", 190 pounds ripped, like in size. But he looks the way he does because everything is functioning and moving correctly. So not only would I say it's important for hypertrophy to make them bigger, but it's also very important just so it looks its best. How many people do you see who have a lot of muscle, but they don't look like a bodybuilder, even if they're lean?
No, that's a great point. At the end of the day, like the sport of bodybuilding, it's not just who's the biggest, it's who's the leanest. You got to have a physique that's flowing. Yes. And it seems like in today's day and age of even open bodybuilding that it almost looks like the judges are looking more at some of the more quote unquote aesthetic physiques as compared to some of just the purely bigger, blockier physiques. So I think that's a great point. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think if a guy is late in his career, he's already added a ton of size, but has neglected this sort of work? Is it too late for that guy? Is it too late to implement this stuff? Is this something you have to implement early on before you're big? Any thoughts on that?
You can do it right now. Here's the thing about it. Opening the hips is the hardest thing you're going to do for yourself. And if you start reading, there's so many books about unlocking your hips, and they talk about the emotional component of all of this. When you read it and you haven't done any of it, you just go, oh, this is some hippie crap. That's how I felt. It's just nonsense. When you do it and you go through the process, you do realize that obviously the brain and body are the same thing. The reason we have the shape that we have is because of the electrical signals coming from our mind. So if our body is bound up, we are experiencing a certain level of pain or discomfort in our brain, even if we don't acknowledge it as that. Because once we get that released, it's literally like a weight comes off us, both physically, like suddenly we start getting movement in our body that we haven't had. And we're like, oh, wow, okay. But also psychologically, I have found nothing is more important than getting the hips fully open. Now, like I said, it's hard work. It's like it's some months, half a year, maybe it takes a year. Who knows? It takes as long as it takes, John. But it's something that once you decide on it, you decide that you want to be your best self and you want to have the best physique. You want to be the strongest. You don't want to have injuries. Then you get the hips open, no matter what it takes.
I couldn't agree more. And I've been following along with all the content you've been putting out over the last couple of years on this. And I think it's really, really good insight. And I think there's a lot of guys who could benefit from that. So, I mean, guys, if you're listening to this, go check out Cornelius Parkin on Instagram. He puts out a lot of content on this topic specifically. Now, I do want to talk about, I want to pick your brain on some things that I know a bunch of my audience is going to be here for. And that's just some philosophy behind building massive physiques and getting shredded. Now, first of all, and I apologize, I should have done this early on in the podcast. Give the audience a quick, a little bit of a background. Where are you from? As the audience has probably noticed, it's not an American accent that they're hearing. Where are you from? Kind of what's your background? How long have you been coaching?
Thanks, John. So I was actually born in Rugby, Tennessee. I then moved to Ireland. That's where I grew up. My father was English, mother Swiss. So you hear a very mixed accent. I basically started training when I was 12. When I was 13, I saw a Flex magazine in the store and I said, one day I'm going to be in America. I'm going to be in the fitness industry and I'm going to have a sports car. I did all of that. But as I went through my teen years, I did aggressive rollerblading. That was my sport of choice. I really enjoyed that. But at the same time, I did weight training. When I turned 18, I made a decision to 100% go into the weight training because it's hard to do both because you really beat your body up when you're jumping around on concrete on rollerblades, not surprisingly. So I went into powerlifting. I did that for a year and a half. I became world GPC overall teenage champion. That was a very good achievement. Another good achievement was I did the all-time, at the time, world deadlift record of 733 at 198. And I had a couple of other records, but that would be the most notable one. After that, I did a load of those meets. I won the Worlds, won the Europeans. I ended up beating the number one guy in the kind of, he was like my Boston Lloyd of the time. His name was Chris Jenkins. He's still at it now. Great guy. He's offered to come over and give me a punch in the old noggin whenever I wanted, even 10 years, 20 years later. After that, I went to America. I studied. I ended up studying psychology. I found it more practical to what I was doing. I did bodybuilding. I won a couple of heavyweight bodybuilding shows. Then in 2011, I broke my spine ski jumping. I decided to take a few years, just totally natural. I just trained and did all that after recovering from that. I ended up winning a pro card in a drug-tested federation, and not one of those lifetime naturals or anything like that. In fact, the guys there they all had like Superdrol and stuff in their bags. I felt kind of gypped in a way. And then I won 2 NPC shows, totally natural, which I found a huge achievement because that's hard to do, especially back 2014. Last show I did was 2016. I competed against, rest in peace, Boston Lloyd, where I won the overall against him. And coaching, I started some in-person training like over 20 years ago. And online, I started in 2007 because I used to be like a VIP moderator, all these different kind of things on different message boards. And obviously on the message boards, people get to know you. And that's how I got my first client like that. I owned a gym for 8 years. I sold that right when the COVID was starting. And I just do online coaching. Besides that,
I mean, since you said 2007 was when you started with the online coaching?
Yeah, 2007.
So
that
guys,
was from the forums.
Yeah, so you were one of the OGs of online coaching. I mean,
there were a couple of guys doing it. Troponin was one. Justin Harris, of course. Skip Hill was another. And Scott Stevenson, I always see him as the greatest mind in bodybuilding. I always say it's always my biggest bragging point. But in his great book, Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach, I am referenced. He's got like 7 people referenced as a coach from whom you can learn. And the day I bought this book, dude, I got it. And when I looked at that, my year was made, I tell you.
No, Dr. Scott Stevenson, guys, I mean, if you're a avid follower of bodybuilding, you know who he is, but another incredible resource. I mean, that is a hell of an accolade being shouted out like that by him. And I mean, he's someone I should reach out to and try to get on the podcast sometime as well. But anyway, I mean, he's absolutely correct. I mean, just I've learned so much from you, and you've just some of the protocols that you were guiding me on have been some of the most successful that I've ever had. And I still use a lot of your philosophies today. So I want to talk about just some of the philosophies of, let's start with getting big, putting on size, putting on muscle. Everyone wants to know about that. Now, before we go into this, I do want to, of course, preface to the audience, we are not medical professionals. We may go into some of the performance enhancing drug side of things, and bodybuilding is, I mean, Cornelius, you mentioned it. It's inherently not a healthy sport when you're pursuing it at an extreme level. So these are not recommendations. We're not endorsing necessarily any of this. But hey, let's just talk about on a philosophical level what it takes to push the edges of human potential when it comes to getting big. So obviously, it's a very broad topic. But what are some of the key pillars, in your opinion, to building a massive physique?
I would say first and foremost, it's having the mindset to actually doing what it takes to do that and wanting to do it. Because a lot of people think they want to do it until they get a few months into it, and then they really don't want to do it anymore, but they're kind of on a train that's already moving. So now they just kind of get sloppy. And when you're trying to do that, as you know, John, there's no room for error. This is a dangerous activity. And there's no room for, just messing around in other aspects of life. You have to have everything locked in, dialed in. If you're going out on the weekend, we see it all the time. You end up dying. That's what happens when you do that. And you see even the young influencers nowadays combining too many different things together and, popping.
Yeah, I put out a video on my YouTube recently talking about some of the potential dangers of PED use. And that was something that I mentioned, just if you're going to be using anabolic steroids and using recreational drugs and partying on the weekends, that's an absolute recipe for disaster. But I mean, you make a great point. I mean, how many people set out to try to get big, and then inevitably their diet just falls into a sloppy, dirty bulk, and they're not living right, all those things. But I think one of the most important things that I learned from you very early on in my career, and it's something that I preach to this day, is the value in getting lean first to set up a growing phase. Can you share your thoughts on that? Do you see value in getting lean on the front end before really trying to push for size?
Dude, everybody has to get lean before. If you want to get big, you have to get lean. And I mean all the way lean. So you don't have any pockets of fat. Because as I'm sure we'll speak later about how the body can impinge on itself, a lot of those pockets of fat are actually body impingements to some degree, and you just need to strip it all down. You need to get your body fully functional, fully open, get that base, and then from that lean base, then you can grow tons. And there's always these people who think you have to get so fat. Of course you don't. If you take anabolic steroids, you can grow into shows. So if you can grow into a show, you certainly can grow muscle when not in a deficit.
Yeah, we hear that phrase, growing into the show. And I mean, let's be honest, if your diet is set up right and you're programming your super supplements correctly, you can do that. I mean, you can add tissue while in a calorie deficit. I mean, you see guys do it. They look better and better and bigger and harder over the course of a prep. Now,
John, John, let me give you a real quick example about just how powerful that is.
Yeah.
So in 2021, I was at 210 pounds. I never get fat or anything like that, but I was detrained and all of that. In 10 weeks, I went from 210, I think it was 10% on this DEXA, to 236 at 6% on the DEXA. And my average calories was 1,500 calories a day. Drugs work. That's the reality of it. So if you do it correctly, and if you do everything correctly, you can grow tremendous amounts of. Like I was shocked. I was honestly a little disgusted by it, John, because it really reinforced this thought and this idea that so much of it really is drugs. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not even saying that, but it really is such a major component.
Yeah, it is. And are you familiar with the name Adam Omachi?
Amazingly, I'm not.
Australian coach. Anyway, he is another guy I respect, but he's put out a lot of content recently just talking about how basically the way you grow with anabolic steroids is basically operating through a different pathway than the way you would grow, naturally with just food and training. It's basically operating almost independently of food intake, of training stimulus. And I mean,
I would say so.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. When it comes to PED use, I mean, is there a ceiling of diminishing returns? Is it just a matter of how much can you take without killing yourself? I mean, how does one over the course of a career just leverage the PED use to work the best in their favor, to A, not die, of course, but B, to if someone wants to just push it to get as big as possible from a super supplement standpoint, whether it's anabolics, insulin, growth hormone, all those things, hypothetical human example here. I mean, what are we looking at?
I think a big part of that is people they need to take into account that of course drugs work, but all drugs do it. If you keep taking drugs, they stop working as well. And people argue, oh, the anabolic steroids aren't like that, but they really are. If you look at anybody who has been doing this for several years, you just hear what they're taking, and their body doesn't necessarily even really change that much when they take those drugs. I truly believe it's like that with every single drug, be that nicotine, anything. Your body will eventually acclimatize to it, and that can take a long time. I'm not saying that happens overnight. You could be looking at 10 years or so. So what I would say is you always want to start really at the minimum, because honestly, a lot of the results do come with that first kind of exposure. And I guess my opinion has changed over the years on this, but now I really owning part of a TRT clinic myself, I really do see the benefit in doing a sports TRT as your base to grow. And a lot of people, if you haven't done anything yet, your base TRT is going to have you growing significantly for a couple of years, realistically. If you're coming, it depends who you're talking about, right? So if you're talking about someone who wants to get really big, they haven't been big before. First, they get all the way lean. Now they're lean. Now they start the sports TRT. Yeah, they're going to have a couple of years of straight growing, at which point, they kind of hit that ceiling, and then they're going to want to add in. And that, what I've noticed a lot, John, is I've noticed a lot of people seem to want to just leverage one system. Like it's just all these anabolic steroids. And I really think that kind of does top out. And I think if you were honest with yourself, you probably can tell when it tops out. It tops out when you stop feeling it. When your blood pressure and stuff starts to go up, you can go, well, I should take a medication to bring it down. Should you? Should you need to do that? I don't know necessarily. If you have it and you want to do that, I suggest you do that. Absolutely. You don't want high blood pressure. But just in general, if something's creating that reaction in you, you have to wonder, is that the right choice to do? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And then once you've got that base going in, I honestly think the next things will be the other tools, which are the growth hormone and the insulin, which I honestly think are the most effective of all the tools. Potentially, people argue about the risks about these things, John, but the growth hormones and the insulins, it's really playing with a dangerous tool, because if you do have any cancerous growth in your body, if you do have anything like that, that'll ignite it like crazy. And nowadays we're exposed to so many toxins and stuff all the time that you have to wonder how risky that is. And obviously I don't have an answer for that, but I would say, yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point when it comes to the growth hormone just driving up IGF-1. That can absolutely be an accelerant of cancer. No, and I think that's something that people may just be completely unaware of. Now, would it be correct to say that it's not going to cause cancer per se, but it would accelerate the growth, or am I wrong? Is it a causal agent of?
Actually, as far as I know, and obviously all these things they haven't been existing that long, so just what we know isn't everything that there is to know, so to speak. But I think you're more at risk if you're injecting, let's say, straight IGF-1. Right. That would be more risky, in my opinion, because at least with the GH, that's something that the body is used to. I don't think that should. But who am I to say that? Crazier things have happened than somebody getting a tumor after taking something that's a growth hormone. If you think about it, just you conceptually think about what you're doing. I mean, it's risky, but it is also very effective, of course. So I think that is really the difference between these guys you saw in the 80s and even the early 90s, you'd have a lot of guys who were heavily leveraging anabolics, like more than people think. And that look really didn't get really crazy for a lot of people until they added in those peptides of insulin and growth hormone. So I do think those are the so-called game changers, as some would say.
Guys, thank you for tuning in and supporting the podcast. I just wanted to take a minute to give a shout out over to my guys at Troponin Supplements. So they're the sponsor of the podcast, and in my opinion, they carry the best supplements on the market, and it's not even close. And they're the one company that I've wanted to align myself with. As a nutrition coach, working with NFL football players, other professional athletes, strongman competitors, bodybuilders, powerlifters, fitness enthusiasts, endurance athletes, I have to be very particular about any supplement company I endorse. And with Troponin Supplements, frankly, it was a no-brainer. These are the products I've been using myself for the last few years, before I ever became involved with the company. I know the owner personally, Justin Harris. He is one of the brilliant minds in the bodybuilding industry, and we've talked, and all he has wanted to do is just bring some of the elite top-of-the-line products to the market, and that's what he's done. So these are the products I recommend and endorse to all my athletes, all my clients. I use myself, and I want to pass this along to you guys as well. So I'm going to highlight a couple products here. First and foremost, we've got the ATP. This is a high dose of caffeine paired with a very powerful nootropic. I take this before work. I take this before I podcast. This is going to give you a great boost in mood, in focus, memory enhancement. You're just going to feel like you took the Limitless pill when you use ATP. It's an effervescent tablet. You drop it in your water, it dissolves, tastes great. The next product, Field Rations. This is the premier intra-workout supplement on the market right now. It's a one-stop shop for all your intra-workout needs. It's based in highly branched cyclic dextrin, contains essential amino acids, electrolytes, tastes amazing. I use this within every training session. Then we've got the Suppressor Max. This is awesome for controlling your blood sugar. It's got a high dose of berberine, but then has complementary ingredients that are going to keep the berberine bioavailable and stay in your system longer. This is the best blood sugar product on the market. If you're bulking, if you're eating a ton of food, if you're using a cheat meal, this is a great product for you. And then finally, I love this one. I've always had sleep issues. Hit the Rack. This is one of the best sleep products I've ever tried. I use it about 30 minutes before bed most nights, and this has been the one supplement that has actually helped me fall asleep and stay asleep. And then, of course, we got the Troponin T logo bodybuilding jersey and the hat. We've got great apparel on the site. So guys, check out Troponin Supplements. You can find the link in the show notes, in the bio, or you can simply just Google Troponin Supplements. Use code HECK, capital HECK, at checkout for a discount. Check them out, guys. These are some of the best products on the market. Do you think that growth hormone shines the most as in a growing phase or as a fat loss agent?
I think elevating your growth hormone levels is going to just cumulatively be, I guess, in our terms, beneficial throughout the body. But obviously, the problem is over the years, you'll start having the nose grow. You see this more if you look at a lot of female competitors. A lot of female competitors get these side effects more. I think with men, men are kind of uglier to start with, so we don't really notice it as much. But I think, yeah, it's working at all times. So I mean, I think it's working on a level that goes beyond what calories we're eating that day.
And let's say we're in that growing phase. How are some of the ways that you most like to use it and leverage it? Some people, they do it fast in the morning. Some people, they do it before bed. Some do 5 on, 2 off. Some do it every day. And I remember you mentioning an interesting protocol to me, doing kind of like a big dose of it once, only every few days or so.
Yeah. So the issue with growth hormone administration is you basically turn yourself into a type 2 diabetic with time. And that's not an issue that people should take lightly. Like if you're in your 20s or early 30s or whatever, you don't really think about it. But the amount of bodybuilders and stuff I've seen 40s, 50s who have these crazy issues with that. So the studies have shown that if you take a larger bolus dose of growth hormone like every other day, that you avoid a lot of those issues. And some people will, this is such a conversation that people argue about. Everyone says they have this perfect protocol of how they use it. For
Right.
me, John, my thing is always the less needles that have to go into the body, the better. So I thought every other day, one shot, and it certainly does work. And if you have less insulin resistance from it, hey, that's a good thing. And if you think, another way to think about it is if you think about how children grow, they grow in bursts. So you're going to have this big elevation and then it'll come back down again. And if you look at how the curve will go when you take those big bolus doses, it's going to look very different to the frequent administrations of smaller dose.
I think that was an interesting point that I learned years back from you, just kind of the that big spike in that curve when you do kind of like the big bolus once every other day, every couple days versus the smaller, more frequent stuff. And then of course you talked about the blood sugar implications of just constantly hammering it day after day after day. What about with the insulin? Are you, some people get worried, oh, I'm going to get fat if I use it in a growing phase. There's people argue kind of the long acting, the Lantus versus, the short acting, the Humalog around training. Do you have any philosophies behind leveraging the insulin side of things for growth?
Well, me personally, I say if you are needing to take insulin to lower your blood sugar, like a long-acting insulin on a daily basis, just take a good look in the mirror and really ask yourself what you're doing. And if you want to keep doing that, keep doing it, absolutely. But you are treading in dangerous water when you start doing that, because you're seeing that blood sugar go up, but that's not the only thing that's happening in your body. So now you're just combating it with the long-acting insulin and you're just forgetting about the problem altogether. I think long-term that could be an issue. And I definitely think that'll help build these big guts that some of the people have. It certainly doesn't help. And it'll certainly increase visceral fat. I think if you're going to use insulin, I think the appropriate time is around training. Obviously, it's a high-risk compound. I mean, you have to have your protocol set up and you have to have your carbohydrates with you at all times. And even then, you're still probably going to go hypo one day and you're going to experience how that feels. That doesn't feel great. But as far as being anabolic, I really do think there is a lot of truth, all the truth, to be honest, to taking it and at the same time using things like highly chain branch dextrins, your amino acids, your creatines, all of this, and just pushing it into the cell while you're training. If our goal is just these big round muscles, I mean, that's what I have found personally works very well.
Yeah, you've been big on intra-workout nutrition, and one of the protocols that you had written for me years back involved a pretty hefty intra-workout bolus of various components. You just mentioned some of them. If you were sort of putting together the perfect intra-workout shake for a huge guy using insulin around training, what might that look like? How many carbs might we be talking about?
I would say the first step is always work yourself up slowly. And it's not even because of the insulin. It's because you don't know how well your body is going to take to the intra shake.
Yeah.
So the last thing you want to do is start yourself on day one with a high dose of insulin, this massive shake, and then your stomach gets wrecked. And then, that's not a good situation. So definitely build your way up in quantities. Because I've done it before where I built it up. I was even having greens powders in my shake. I was making it literally the kitchen sink, and it was about over 2 liters of liquid I would have in total. I would start drinking 10 minutes before the gym, and I was probably finishing it on the way home by the time I got back. But I would start obviously with your carbohydrates, your basics, your essential amino acids, your creatine, and then you can quickly add in your citrulline, malate. I really just find anything like that, peri-workout, supplement-wise, you can, as long as it doesn't upset your stomach, there's probably a benefit. And the insulin is going to shove it into the cell much more efficiently. So, yeah.
And, let's say we're talking about a competitor now who's gotten to a point in their career. They're pretty big. They probably now they've brought up their anabolics very high. They're already leveraging some of these compounds. How does a guy like that keep progressing? I mean, what's the key? Is it a matter of taking training to another level? Is it a matter of more food? Is it a matter of pushing drugs even higher? If we're dealing with a guy who's already got a good base of muscle, they've already brought up dosages really high. How does a guy like that keep progressing, or has he kind of screwed himself by just running things up too high too early?
No, I don't think he screwed himself, but he has to address whatever he has not been addressing. And he has to be really honest with himself, John, and really ask himself truly, what has he been neglecting as far as his body goes? And that can be something as simple as stretching or so, but you can't judge your potential as being tapped out if you're bound up through your hips, if you're bound up through your shoulders, if you struggle to, move through basic ranges of motion. Why would your body want to add more contractile tissue if you're in that state. It wouldn't. So I would say the main thing is to honestly get everything truly open through the hips, through the shoulder. And I know it's a repetitive thing that I'm saying, but this is like the step you need to take in order to do everything else that you want to do. So I think that's what they have to focus on. And if they already have that, well, I haven't seen anybody who's had that issue, John. You'd have to show me somebody who is truly stuck and their body is working perfectly and they're already doing all those other things. And that's a very rare case indeed.
No, and hey, I really appreciate the fact that, I ask a question like that and, you're not a guy who's like, oh, just take more stuff, or, it comes back to movement for you. It comes back to just a holistic approach to the body. And I couldn't agree more with that. Like with my own coaching, working with whether it's strongman competitors, powerlifters, whatever, I'm always trying to build the most well-rounded athlete as possible. Like we if it's a powerlifter, we can't just focus on powerlifting year round. We got to take an off season where, like things like you said, we got to move in different planes of motion. We got to focus on other movement patterns. We got to address all of the compensations and weaknesses that you've built by just being so specifically focused on one thing for so long. And that leads to issues. You're going to quickly hit a ceiling if you're just so specifically focused on one thing and you're not addressing all the other potential general components of development. So I think that's a good point. But just, wrapping things up on sort of the, the PEDs and guys getting huge, what kills bodybuilders? And you mentioned some of the dangerous mixes, recreational drugs, things like that. But what are some of the biggest health considerations bodybuilders need to take into account if they know that, hey, they're pursuing a top level, they're going to be pushing extremes, they're going to be huge, they're going to be taking all the drugs? What are some measures that they can take to allow themselves to live a long life?
I mean, the biggest issue pretty much always is going to, assuming the person has their blood pressure under control, and you'd be a pretty crappy bodybuilder if you're just running around with high blood pressure. You're meant to be building your body, right? So if your blood is pressurizing through the veins and vessels, that's not ideal. But it's going to be calcification of the arteries. That's what gets you. And if you look at most of these bodybuilders as they get older, they're getting stiffer and stiffer. If your tissue here is getting harder, it only goes to sense that the tissue around your arteries is also getting harder. So the more bound up you're becoming, the more occluded your blood vessels are going to get. And eventually it's going to block and you're going to have a heart attack. And that it's basically just speeding up this accumulation of plaque and crap throughout the arterial wall, just like super speed. So with this, and it just gets worse if you eat poorly or don't do your cardio or don't do your stretching and let your body just bind up on itself. And it's basically a squeezing where the blood vessels will no longer be able to pump. And yeah, that'll be the big issue.
Are there any health supplements that you see value in, whether it's, an antioxidant like NAC or, things of that nature? Are there any things that you would recommend for a bodybuilder to have in their health supplement arsenal just to help with organ health in general?
I mean, our main priority always with the body is basically combating inflammation, right? So we're always and binding up of the body is inflammation of the body. And, that's one of the symptoms is you're going to get this binding up of the tissue. So I would say if you're going to, for something that's very strong, injectable, glutathione, I should say, glutathione is effective. And that's going to really pull down that inflammation in a way that's significant. And if you don't use that, you can use obviously NAC. 2 to 3 grams of that every day. That helps. And there's tons of supplements too, but I wonder, that's something I've been wondering more and more. Really, these little pills, and they say it's got all this stuff in it. Does it really though? Does it really? Because you see all these testing for like protein powders or for this over that, huge companies that sell their food in the store, and you're just learning that most of them are full of nonsense and it doesn't contain what they say. So what's the chance? And even if they do contain it, are those herbs or whatever still in good enough quality to even have an effect? So what I would say is very important is actually your diet and really eating a lot of antioxidant rich food, your berries, your fruit, all of it. That's really important. I would put that over supplements, just a daily intake of nutritious actual food.
No, I think that's a great point, and I'm huge on that with my own diet, with my own coaching. I love building fruit into the diet, fermented foods into the diet, potassium-rich foods, which helps with blood pressure, like whether it's spinach and Greek yogurt and potatoes and things like that. Drinking coconut water intra-workout. So no, I mean, of course, a guy like me, people follow me that know that I'm huge when it comes to just the micronutrient intake. When it comes to diet, as I know that you are as well. But before I move on from you mentioned the glutathione, which I am curious about that. What would a good protocol be for glutathione? My understanding is it's not something that you want to necessarily use around training because it's such a powerful antioxidant. It can have sort of that blunting of the hypertrophy effect. Is this sort of a thing you just take on off days?
Yeah, so I think obviously you'd have to check with your doctor or whoever prescribes it to you. But what I have found is I like to take it like in little bursts. Like I might take it for a couple of days straight and then leave it off again. Or maybe occasionally, like after a very hard destructive workout or so, where you really push yourself, maybe the next day taking it, that can be useful.
Got it.
And then a lot of people go for those drips. You know, if you have the money for that and you have a drip near you, that's a great addition to your program.
When you look at blood work, what are some of the metrics that you tend to look at, or some of the red flags that you look out for on blood work?
I mean, basically anything being out of range isn't a good thing, is it? I mean, we have to take into account that creatinine is going to be higher in bodybuilders, and that's not a direct kidney marker. You need to get your cystatin C tested if you want to test how your actual kidneys are doing. Otherwise, you're going to get all freaked out by the creatinine and the estimated GFR. I know I got freaked out by that like 20 years ago nearly. Your AST and ALT are probably going to be a little elevated. That can be from training. But just because they're elevated from training doesn't mean it's necessarily a good thing to have those levels always elevated. That's a different thing to discuss. But then obviously blood viscosity, you don't want the red blood cells too high. You want to look at the cholesterol, but mainly the ratio is a big one, and you're looking at the VLDL, the very low density, the really bad ones. So you want to see how that is looking. And in general, I try not to play doctor too much as far as that goes, but those are the numbers that can easily be a little out of whack for a bodybuilder and still be normal, right? I would say if anything is significantly out of range, that means something is up. I mean, it doesn't have to be life-threatening or anything, but it means something isn't optimal. So it's good to have a look further in. But obviously, and I'm sure you tell all your clients this, but if you're going to go and get blood work and you want it to be reflective of how your kidney function actually is, you need to, for 5 to 7 days before you go in, reduce your protein. You might as well. Don't weight train. And then when you go and get your blood work, make sure you are fully hydrated. Fasted does not mean dehydrated. So if you're dehydrated, your red blood cells higher, everything's going to look weird. Your BUN is going to be weird. So you have to be super hydrated and not trained for a few days if you really want a good, accurate one.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you go in dehydrated, if you go in, you just trained hard the day before, if you go in with food in your stomach, I mean, there's so many of those metrics are just going to be thrown out of range, and it's going to be a false alarm. So that's a very good point. Well, just on the growing topic before I get off it, but just moving away from anything supplement related, going into the diet, you'll see kind of arguments out there when it comes to pushing food for muscle gain. There are those who argue kind of this main gaining approach, right? Where it's just stay as lean as possible, just stay in as small as surplus as possible, versus those who are more old school and really pushing the food. And I'm sure this kind of, it's different from individual to individual, but generally speaking, where on that spectrum do you fall?
I mean, you have to push the food enough that you get the results that you want. And that amount is different for different people. I will say, once people get into this number where they're people beside yourself, John, I have to say, I have met so many different professional people over the years. You are probably the largest person I've ever come across. And I say that as a true compliment. When you came into my gym that one time at like 320, I was like, break out. Truly impressed. So this isn't applying to people like yourself. But let's say average size people, once they're eating 6,000 calories a day, they're not gaining weight. If you actually followed them around and saw what their digestion was like, I bet they're barely absorbing half of that food that they're putting in. So I honestly don't think I don't think in general people need as much food as they think, but it's very easy to get into this state where you're constantly needing to push more food in to make the body weight continue. Now, I would say that if you're doing it and it's working, then okay, keep that struggle up. But once the actual growth seems to stop and you're just starting to get a little fattier and now you're just pushing more food in, the body will only do what it wants to do. And when it's done growing for a while and you're just trying to force it like that, I don't think that's beneficial. But I think like trying to be neurotic and keep your abs looking a certain way year round, that's ridiculous too, because that's not even good for you. If you're constantly in a calorie minus, you're going to become deficient in stuff, and you're just going to basically do the opposite of bodybuilding. You're just going to body shorten your life in the end because you're not getting enough nutrients in on a daily basis because you're constantly, and if you're doing the maintaining, you're talking about like Greg said, so you're not even eating too well to start with. You're just making your macros up with like BS foods and that. I mean, but I would say I know exactly what you mean. And I really think, as with everything, there's kind of a middle ground to it. But yeah, you have to eat, you have to build your way up to that food. I think that's where people do it wrong, right? They get really lean and then they eat like an a-hole for a week or two. Now they blow up all this water and fat. And then they start eating 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day. And then they just get fat. While if they hadn't filled all their reserves up as soon as the diet was over, but instead they went straight onto their diet and then pump that diet up every week a little bit, I bet they would have stayed very similar, get a little bit of fat, but gain a lot of muscle.
Yeah. And you hit something that I think is a really good point, which is you'll see people who are eating like tons of calories, but they're not adding any size. And like you said, how much of that food are you actually absorbing and actually assimilating? And I had a client recently who we're trying to put some muscle on him. And his diet before he came to me, it was, just your typical kind of dirty bulking food. And we really cleaned up his diet, became more quality, but lower in calorie on paper. And he started growing. And he's like, well, how is this physically possible? And I said, well, now you're actually absorbing the food that you're eating, right? If you're just eating like shit and you're not, it's just wrecking your digestion and all those things. If digestion is hindered, you are not absorbing the nutrients that you're consuming, right? Versus, okay, if you're eating a diet that is very accommodating to digestion, it's anti-inflammatory, your blood sugar is staying in better ranges, you're staying more insulin sensitive because of that. Now you're actually creating a system where your body can grow. So, I mean, it comes back to food quality so much. This is why I don't really agree with just kind of the coaches who are just macro coaches. I'm like the food selections themselves, the food quality itself is such a key variable here. It's not just a calories in, calories out equation, because the calories in component is going to vary depending on what you're eating and how you're responding to it, if you're actually absorbing those nutrients.
100% true. I mean, and that's, I always say, traditionally humans were meant to spend hours each day trying to gather our food. Yet people are so lazy now, they barely want to cook their own food and forget going to various different stores to pick up all the best actual food. They don't want to do that either. When in reality, that's a big part of life. Is if you want to have a successful, healthy life, I spend at least an hour every day just going from store to store. There's, every store has something different that you might need. Just collecting all the right foods. I mean, food is what we're made out of. That's what we're literally making ourselves. So I don't want to use crappy materials to make myself. That would not make sense.
100%. And just on the diet track here, there's some kind of fad diets going around out there. There's this sugar diet that's become very mainstream popular now. Guys like my friend Mark Bell, who I had recently on the podcast to talk about it. Of course, you've got your keto diets, things like that. Let's start with the sugar diet. Have you heard about this at all? Have you anything about this?
I think if I had spent, let's say, a decade or so on a primarily carnivore diet, right? Just basically not eating carbs at all. And then suddenly I realized that eating sugars actually gives me energy. then I probably do really well on a sugar diet too. I mean, Mark has just realized what every lean, healthy person knows, and that's sugar gives you energy. I used to take a 2 liter bottle of Coke to the skate park when I skated, and I would drink like an intra shake. I would drink that sucker. Of course, the only thing is, John, like the number of people that should be following that is like the same number of people who look like Mark Bell. Not that many, right? I mean, you have to be in a specific situation where that diet makes sense for you. And for most people, I don't think it makes sense. But if you're trying to just do an aggressive little diet, yeah, the best diet is you literally eat a little bit of sugar every few hours when you feel bad. Eat an orange. A few hours later, you have like, let's say a can of Coke or something. Yeah, you'll find that you can go through the whole day. And by the end of it, you've had maybe 800 calories coming from sugar. So, I mean, that is something that can work. But I don't think this is a diet that people should really follow unless they're in, like I said, more situation where it makes sense.
What are the interesting components about it that, allegedly contributes to, some of the metabolic phenomenon of getting lean is this hyper restriction of protein. And I'm not super well versed on this specifically. I've only kind of recently started reading into it, but just on the general topic, do you think a super high protein approach is necessary, is optimal? Do you think people could go with a lower protein approach still staying in the realm of physique enhancement?
I think that really does depend on the person and how they do with the protein intake. Like a lot of us have a ceiling. I tried to go over 400 grams and I'd always get acid reflux.
Yeah.
From eating the meat. And if you get an acid reflux, something is, I don't think you can change around the protein, but I really found that was kind of the issue for me. Once I started going over 400 grams, I would start having issues like that. So I would say if you like to eat a lot of protein and you're like Ty Green used to eat, like a pound of fish per meal for several meals per day or whatever. If you do well with it, sure, do it. But I would work my way up slowly. And my overall thought of how much protein is needed is definitely much lower than it used to be. I definitely think like 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. I'm not saying it's the best for growing muscle, but just for maintaining it and all of that, that's more than plenty. And if growing up, generally, honestly, John, I'll take people up 1.25 to 1.5 generally. So a 200-pound guy might easily be 300 grams of protein. So, and then if you're bigger than that, the amount can go up. But it really does depend on the person. And some people really do better with less, like 4.5 ounces, but a bit more carbohydrates. So it depends on the person there.
Yeah. Like for me personally, I've kind of found that in a growing phase, I do a little bit better with slightly lower protein and higher carb intake. When I'm just hammering a ton of meat all day, my appetite tanks very early. I run into some of those digestive issues like you talked about. I'm prone to the acid reflux. I've dealt with kind of the GERD issues here over the last few years, and I'm not talking low protein where, but it might be just a gram per pound of body weight or a little bit less, and then making up for the calories with carbohydrates. But when I'm dieting like I am now, it's the opposite. I actually bring my protein up higher. It's more satiating for me. And, you can make the argument kind of that higher thermic effect of food with higher protein, which can be beneficial deep in a diet as well. What about something like a keto or a carnivore diet? Is that something that you see value in, not necessarily for physique enhancement, but for any type of individual?
Yeah, I don't think it's good for your physique because, I mean, glycogen in the muscle is what gives that muscle that nice appearance. So if you're really trying to have a nice round physique, you of course need carbohydrates. But I honestly think a low-carb diet is great for basically anyone who has excess body fat, right? I mean, carbohydrates are our energy source. I'm not necessarily into a true keto diet of 70% fat, 26% protein, 4% carb or whatever, because that's a hard diet to eat. It's not that. If somebody likes that diet, sure, but I would never do the approach of just eat as much fat and protein as you want. Just don't eat carbs because, you can eat a pound of bacon if you want, then offset that completely. And I think the carnivore diet, look, anything that, if you need to follow the carnivore diet, so you finally follow a freaking diet plan and get yourself into shape, then do the carnivore diet. It's great approach. But I mean, with all diets like that, they come with specific restrictions that, in truth, for you, probably don't need to be there. But in order for it to be a diet and have a methodology, so to speak, they have to have, the no foods, so to
Right.
speak. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, something I've kind of argued why I think a lot of these diets get popular is because it kind of comes with this group identity with these diets that have names to it. It's kind of like this identity cult, almost like, oh, I'm a keto guy, I'm a vegan, I'm following the sugar diet. People are talking about it as a name. I can identify with something that's bigger than myself, and that kind of ropes people in, and they're more focused on that than they are the actual methodology and logic behind the diet itself, which that might work for some people who kind of like stay keto for most of their life, but most of these people, they fall into this fad, and then it just falls out of vogue. It kind of loses its shiny appeal after a bit, and then they just fall off that wagon. Like, I'm sure there's so many people on the sugar diet right now who are doing it because Mark Bell's popularizing it, but a year from now, 90% of these people are not going to be doing this anymore because go ahead.
I said you would hope not, right? You would hope they're not still on the sugar diet after a year of, because I mean, then you'd have the sugar diet, I think, is great in certain circumstances, and you've made some great points. But at the end of the day, you're going to want protein again because your body is made out of that. So
Right.
it's
Exactly.
like any fast, right? The fast does eventually end. Even if you do a 30-day fast, after 30 days, it's over. And now you're eating protein again. I think a lot of these fads end up being a problem for people because they just stick on it. So you see those fruitarians who drop dead on Instagram, at age 28 or whatever, because they literally only ate fruits for a couple of years. Most of the time when people say I'm a carnivore or anything, knowing what people's actual adherence is, I think that's a good thing, because that probably means that 70% of the time, that's what they're doing. And the rest of the time, they're probably doing something else, so it balances out. But if you truly hardcore stick on of those approaches and you do that long term, you're probably going to run into problems with all of those really restrictive approaches. You're going to become deficient in something.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I always point out, like with the keto diet, like the body can go into ketosis not because, oh, this is something it wants to do, it should do. It's literally a survival mechanism that your body has to not die when it's in a state of starvation. Like if your body will start producing ketones if you're stranded in the desert for days with no food. Eventually you'll go into this state of ketosis to keep you alive for a bit. And people try to leverage this as if it's just sort of this optimal way that the body should be operating. And it's not. It's just this thing our body can do. It doesn't mean it's this thing that our body should do. Right.
100%. Yeah, that's the 100% the truth. It's literally a mechanism so we don't die.
But you touched on something that I do want to pick your brain on, because you and I actually we spoke about this a couple years back, and that's fasting, and not intermittent fasting, but I'm talking like a true 36 72 hour fast, and I know that you do see some value in that in certain situations. Can you speak on the potential values of doing an extended fast? Who might be a candidate for utilizing it, when and why?
So I think basically anyone can be a candidate as long as they're not already like underweight. Doesn't make a lot of sense for them. Basically, you have autophagy. Basically, the bad cells in the body start to get eaten up by the rest of the body after, I don't know, about 16, 18 hours or so of fasting. I think that's a number, but I think in reality, it takes a little bit longer. And there really is, in my opinion, a lot of benefits from, I found 3 days is perfect. When I went 5 days, you start running into issues if you didn't supplement with electrolytes like your regular heartbeat. I've had a couple of people who ended up that. I've had some flowers myself when I did it too much. 3 days, you really don't need anything. You can just go straight water, just cut everything out for 3 days. I think it's a great mental reset. It's a great way of clearing out the body. You're not going to lose muscle in 3 days. The only way you do that is if we went and did a lot of exhaustive like weight training and stuff. Use that as a time off anyway, those 3 days. Do a lot of mobility work, stretching. Don't break yourself down while you're in that state. But yes, I think there's a lot of benefits to doing a 3-day fast as far as just well-being goes. And when we have that extended fast and the body starts eating at some of the materials it doesn't need, I really do think that will help tighten up skin and do things like that. And if you think about how many calories, how many pounds of tissue potentially could be affected in that day, let's say you burn 3,500 calories, that's a pound of fat, but it's much more than 1 pound of lean tissue. So as far as eating up, like I think you can do a lot of beneficial stuff for the body. Yes. And I think at least once a year, pretty much everybody should consider doing it anyway.
Okay, yeah, that's one thing I was just going to ask was how frequently. So once a year might be a good frequency for, let's say, a bodybuilder. You know, somebody. I know a lot of bodybuilders would be terrified to do a fast because they feel like they got to be eating. It's going to sabotage things. When within the year for a bodybuilder would be a good time to do it? Would it be a good time to do it in the middle of a off-season growing phase, during a diet phase, a maintenance phase? When is the best time to implement the fast?
The best time to do a 3-day fast, and this is what I'll do with a lot of my clients, is when we are changing approaches. So let's say we just finished an off-season. Now we are going to start a diet. So what we can do is we do a 3-day fast, let the insides really heal up before we start the exhaustive process of dieting for a show. Because the last thing you'd want is to go from one phase to the next, just carrying just some issues with you. And that can be so many different things from, gut flora. Everything gets affected by the foods we eat, even if it's good food. So just taking 3 days off like that, it goes over. And you might find after 3 days, you're like, I've had that before where I can go a couple more days. And then you go 5 days. But when you do that, you make sure that you're taking some electrolytes on day 3 just to make everything keep going. Just some salt primarily, but potassium, magnesium is good too.
And with that 3-day fast, you said you recommend just water, no black coffee, no salt.
Black coffee would be fine.
Okay.
Black coffee is fine. Salt be fine, but I wouldn't add anything else in there. No. A lot of people like to do these juice fasts and stuff. And yes, I think there is a benefit to those, but the full fast where you're taking nothing in, and even coffee, I say it's fine. Like if you're really stuck with having your couple of cups a day or so, and that really makes it much easier for you, I don't think it will ruin the process in any shape or form. But, obviously you probably would do better to not put any caffeine into your body for those 3 days either. That's the thing. Is that make it like a total cleanse from everything, even nicotine, everything. Just for 3 days, it's gone, and then you add stuff back in. Yeah, all of that. It's tough, but sometimes just absolutely cutting it all is the easiest way, I find.
I was just going to say, don't tell me I got to cut the nicotine out for the fast as well. But no, I think it's a great point. Give your body the total reset. If you're going to go all in on that, you might as well just clear out all the potential toxins and vasoconstrictors and all those different things. So no, okay. So that's a great answer. So a great time to do it. You just wrapped up your off season. You just pushed 16 weeks of a calorie surplus. Okay, time to shift gears, go into a prep mode. Kick things off with the 3-day fast. Give that digestive system a break. Go give your body an opportunity to go into that autophagy where you're turning over some of those damaged cells, and you can really start with a clean slate going into your prep or into your diet phase. And I think that's great advice. Well, speaking of diets, and I won't keep you much longer, I promise. Just a couple more questions, then I'll let you go. But so I'm deep in a diet myself. I'm getting lean. All I can think about is food right now. When it comes to dieting, here's a question that gets debated. Where do you stand on things like refeeds and cheat meals and high carb days?
I think it's totally the biggest factor that I look at is the client psychology and which one they seem to benefit the most from. If it makes their diet really easy to have a day where they just go super high in the carbs, and it's going to work. I mean, that approach does work. So if that approach is what works well for them, then that's what we'll do. I'll often change it even throughout a diet. I might using a varying approach. Maybe one weekend I'll tell them to hit X number of carbs over the course of the weekend, maybe a very high number, and then very low carbs for the rest of the week. But as far as your question, yeah, absolutely, I use them. I think they have great purposes. First and foremost, psychological, and then once you get lean, yes, big benefits for the body as well.
So let's take psychology out of the equation. And of course, that's a huge thing. You're dealing with a human being, not a robot. But let's say you're working with a bodybuilder who's totally willing to go into robot mode. No issues with adherent. You can you can starve them for 16 weeks. They won't bat an eye. From a pure physiological physique standpoint, how and when would you implement, the refeeds, the high days, possibly a true burger and fries type cheat meal, or even would you?
Again, and it really depends on how the client is responding, but I would, if I'm taking an aggressive approach with the diet where the carbs are low on a daily basis, then I will be much more prone to having a large carb refeed on the weekend or so. If it's more of a static, low to moderate approach, not too bad. I'll often, if their pictures are starting to look a little flat or so, I might say add in 300 carbs in the next day or two, spread it out however you wish. I'll use that approach. If I feel like our progress is going great, look, at the end of the day, the male body can't store fat from one meal anyway. Our bodies are not efficient enough for that. Women's, of course, are, but we are not. So one meal is never going to hurt anything. So especially if they have an event or something coming up, I'm not going to say, hey, just do this super high carb day when they could have, let's say, a cheat meal on that day. Much easier as far as the social aspect of it goes. And as far as, I know you're not focusing on the psychology, you're focusing on the physical. Honestly, until they're really stringy looking, it's all psychological. That's why we're doing it. Otherwise, you just die. You can diet a lot of people down quite hard for quite a long time because, let's be honest, if you're eating a lot of protein, you're converting quite a few of those to carbohydrates anyway. So it's not like you're, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know. You'd have to be more specific for a more specific answer, I think, on this one.
No, that's a totally fair point, and I agree with you. I think a lot of guys, especially when they're self-coached, will kind of like talk themselves into this. Oh, I need, or I will benefit from the cheat meal, from the high day. So, somebody like me right now, I'm implementing a high carb day on a body response basis. It's not a every week thing, but like the other week I hit a 5-pound drop in body weight. I was visibly flatter, and I just felt zombified. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do a big 1,200 gram carb refeed.
Yeah.
Might that be would you agree with that approach, or would you say no?
100%. And for based on how big you are, I would probably do that for 2 days in a row, to be honest. I mean, especially if you dropped 5 pounds, do you mean 5 pounds from one day to the next? Like, that's a big scale shift. Or do you mean over the week?
From the previous week, I was down 5 pounds.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And
so, yeah,
my average rate of loss was about a pound a week, and then all of a sudden I had a week where it was a 5-pound drop.
Yeah, that's a huge drop. I mean, I certainly wouldn't be concerned about it, but I would certainly have those higher carbs. And I mean, you can judge it based on if you have, let's say, 1,200 on Saturday. If you wake up on Sunday and you have lost weight, or your weight is about the same, then you can easily go more with the carbs, right? If you've gone up 10 pounds, then you probably, you've got plenty of glycogen in there. You're storing a lot of them. But especially someone your size, in my experience, once we get to that point of a diet, those high carb days, people just burn through them. And it does definitely help the next few days of training. But as far as slowing the fat loss or so, I never find the high carb days slow fat loss. So, for that reason, I think people sometimes want them too early. If you still got plenty of fat on your body, you don't really need that. But once you're lean, yeah.
And would you ever see, again, take the psychology out of it, take the social aspect out of it, would you ever see a physiological value in opting for the fattier, high sodium burger and fries type of meal versus the, hey, let's get in an extra 500 grams of carbs type approach? Or would you say, if the body is depleted, it's getting stringy, it's always going to benefit physiologically more from a strategic carbohydrate refeed?
I think it'll probably benefit for our purposes of getting ripped and lean more from the carbs.
Right.
But like if you eat even 1,000 carbs, generally not that much happens. But if you eat a burger and fries, generally the next day, you might be up a couple of pounds. I find that kind of sticks a lot different in the body. So it depends. If the body is starting to spiral, then I wouldn't just keep throwing more carbs at it. You're just going to make it spiral more. I've had clients before that were eating, like client Kyle Puckett, little Asian guy, even at 150 pounds, he was eating 600 carbs, I believe it was. going into the prep because he was just burning through them so much. Well, I've had other clients who are much, much bigger and their bodies obviously respond very differently to that. But yeah, if the body is going out of control, I would always do the burger and fries.
Yeah, and Justin Harris would always, he's got this thing he calls the runaway metabolism, where like you just called it spiraling. And I think that's a good point. Like at that point, it's like, okay, throw the meal or the day that's going to stick more. And that
you probably need to eat all day one day. Like you got once that really starts happening, because then suddenly the scales start changing in weird ways and you're losing weight left, right, and center. And that weight doesn't seem to come back when you eat carbs. Like you have to get past the diet to get that weight back. So if the body starts doing that, I would definitely even have a day where the person just eats away.
Right. Well, I've got 2 more questions for you. Number one, and I've been dying to go into this one. You posted on your Instagram story a couple days ago talking about a protocol, testicular stretching, and this I'm assuming is going to cycle back. And everyone just paused, like what the way out of left field here. But I'm assuming this is going to cycle back more to the opening up the hips type of thought process. But please enlighten me and the audience about this testicular stretching protocol.
So, you'll notice a lot of guys end up with tight hips. And it really doesn't matter. Why are your hips tight? What should that exactly be? Especially if you go into the splits position and you can't get to about a foot off the ground. You should be able to do that if your hips are working normally. What I've realized is what's happening is people's testicle skin is literally growing and melting into the inside of the legs, into the glutes. Basically, we're always sitting. And what happens is the fibers start growing and binding together just in the very inside of the upper inner leg. So you'll never notice that unless you go through a very specific hip movement, which will target that area. And then over time, that can get worse and worse. And you won't really know the way you can notice it. And every guy I've said this to is goes, yep, I've got it. You look at your inner thighs. And if your inner thighs have what look like little stretch marks, that's not stretch marks. That's literally testicle tissue that has kind of grown and splattered in there. And what you have to do twice per day is you literally have to lotion that entire area, and then you have to manually stretch and hold for like 1 minute in each direction. And I kid you not, this is the primary reason that guys have tight hips. And once they fix that, and it takes as long as it takes, it can take weeks and weeks because it's literally skin that has grown together. So it's not that easy just to fix it. But once you fixed it, not only is your actual testicle sac, and I'm not joking, double in size, 100%, dude, but also all the mobility that you thought you didn't have in your entire body opens up. I'm not even joking, 100% serious.
No,
shoulders, hips, everything. Because if you think about it, left hip, right hip should be independent of each other. If it's binding in the middle of that, it's pulling everything and holding everything together. If the engine of your body, your hips, are stuck together, everything else is going to end up getting stuck together as well.
How aggressively are we talking with the stretch here? Like how much pressure are we applying?
As aggressively as you can maintain for about 1 minute without like hurting yourself. Without like moderate stretch is what I say. Good moderate stretch. And what you do is you stand straight up, you stretch, you contract your glutes the entire time. And the entire time you're inhaling through your nose, you're exhaling through your mouth. You have to hold that for about a minute, and you should feel some of that tissue release. And it just takes time. You just got to keep, depending how bad you have it, you just got to work more and more on it. But that's the biggest. It's totally out of left field. It sounds like it, but if you actually think about it, and you think about the area, and you think how you're sitting, and you think about how you never probably thought about that even being an issue, it's the primary issue that guys have found hips. So that's what I realized. So all these mobility, because I used to do these different exercises and stuff, and some of them would just be like extreme pain. I just couldn't do it. So it was only when I realized that was the issue, and then I fixed it, and then I was like, holy crap, full range of mobility through my entire body now, and even my mind, because my body, it's all the same thing, it's all connected. That felt way better. It was like a load came off my brain, and it's a real game changer, but it's something you have to be very persistent in, because literally, it's like I said, if skin has grown together, it's not just a case of one time yank.
Yeah.
If you watch old martial art films, you'll see them doing this. Like there's one bit I've seen it where he grabs himself and he rips left, rips right, and he opens himself up, obviously. And the kickboxer, they rip his legs apart. That's ripping those bindings that you have. I honestly think if you did that in someone who's heavily bound, I think you would just rip other stuff around it. That's why you don't want to do that. But that is the issue I have found. And it's just an issue. If you don't realize it's the issue, you're never going to realize it's the issue. And you're always going to be working on your shoulder mobility on this and that and not addressing the actual issue.
Okay, well, I'm going to take your word for it, and I'm going to start trying it.
Dude, the
And
easiest way to test, I say this, I'll say it real quick. You grab your junk, you stand in a sumo squat, and you do a Cusack squat to the left, Cusack squat to the right while holding. And if you feel any pulling, if it doesn't feel like the left hip is separate from the right hip, like it should, when you go down, that'll be your issue.
I'm actually visualizing that, and I can just about guarantee I would have that adhesion. So interesting. And I mean, just for getting clicks on this episode, I should probably title this, testicular stretching and PED protocols if I want to get the most views on this thing. Well, one more question, and I know this is, I mean, there's probably a number of things on here. And I could probably already guess the answer, but what are some things that you've just changed your mind on or evolved as a coach? What are a couple of the things that you have evolved with over the last, call it 5 years?
Right, there's a few different things. I mean, the big one obviously is realizing that bodybuilding doesn't, with our training and stuff, doesn't exist in a vacuum. So people think that the stretching, mobility, all this stuff is kind of like an adjunct, something that's good to add. But in reality, this is all stuff that's affecting us every moment that we're alive. Like if we have tightness here. So learning that first and foremost, this is what we have. This is our foundation. That's the big thing that I've learned. And I realized that it takes a lot more work than I ever would have thought it would take. And as far as coaching people, it's a hard one because I really see competitive bodybuilding as kind of a psychological disorder to a large degree with a lot of these people, to the point where it's like, honestly, I had enough of dealing with that with a lot of them. So it's just like I kind of distance. I still have some people who compete, so I'm not talking about everybody or anything like that. But for a while, I was training a lot of competitors. It was really, I realized that a lot of people never end up happy. You can even make it on the Olympia stage and you end up thinking it was a failure because you didn't place as well as you wanted. So it's like that kind of negative attitude that seems to reside with so many of these people, like constantly. I think that's something that I used to have myself. I think that's something we can all work on. And I think that getting a little bit of self-work psychologically on top of all the training that we're already doing, I think that will only complement the training and stuff that we're doing. Too many people see it as something separate. They're so focused on creating this perfect body that they think this stuff over here, it's not really important right now, when in reality, it is important for your goal.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's not just bodybuilding, like any sport, anyone who's just trying to pursue the top level where that just consumes their life, they make it to the top and then, okay, they get the win or whatever, and then it's over. And then it's like, now what? They realize it's not as fulfilling as they might have hoped. Now it's like, all right, well, just back to the drawing board. We got to do it again, I guess. I have to beat my old self. Otherwise I'm a failure. And no, I couldn't agree more with that. And I mean, that's really something I've had to realize over the years, especially like being a father now and focusing on a business and all those things. You realize, like, if you just put all of your eggs in one basket, if one thing goes wrong with that, you get injured, you lose, whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just devastating to your entire psyche, and your world collapses around you. So you've got to be more multifaceted in what you care about and focus on than just bodybuilding, right? Well, Con, you've been very generous with your time, and just you've dropped some great wisdom here. As always, I'll be excited to get this one out. And now that I'm back in the great state of North Carolina, I'll be, I'm sure, able to cross paths with you again here soon. I'll be excited to see you again. Absolutely. But in the meantime, man, where can people find you at?
Parkin_Cornelius on Instagram is the main one, and there's links to everything else on there.
Got it. Well, guys, go give him a follow. Now, am I correct in saying you had an Instagram page that got shut down a few years ago, and you basically had to like rebuild everything from scratch?
I did, and then I ended up getting that page back a year later.
Okay, good. Well, guys, go give him a follow on Instagram. He puts out some great content. And guys, as always, stay tuned for episodes of the Hammer and Chisel Performance Podcast, dropping every Tuesday. And then you can find me, hammerchiselperformance.com, my coaching services, ebooks, training programs, all that's on there. I encourage you guys subscribe here to the YouTube channel. Or if you're listening to it on Spotify, go check out the YouTube channel, subscribe, follow on Instagram, all those good things. But anyway, Con, I appreciate you, man.
Thank you so much. This was great, John. I really enjoyed this.
Yes, sir. We'll talk soon.